to IFAS St. Lucie County Extension. Our program today, we're going to look at springing into our landscape, because spring is a time for planting, a time for doing lots of our, what we would consider house cleaning. We do our windows, we do all of the cleaning in the house, and now it's time to maybe look at the landscape. It's a great time of year. All of our new things are blooming, the trees are popping, you know, we've got lots of flowers, lots of pollen, lots of things are going on in the landscape. So now is a great time to look at some of our spring house cleaning. And you know, you may want to know, how do I get rid of these weeds, or how do I prune my trees, or how should I be fertilizing my landscape, or the lawn, or the shrubs, or my vegetable garden? So some of those questions are going to be answered by one of our experts from the University of Florida's St. Lucie County Extension Office, Ed Scavarch, our commercial horticulture agent.
Hi, Anita.
Hi.
You're trying to tell me that come springtime you clean your windows?
I do.
Wow.
I do.
Okay.
I do. It's really, it's, I guess, something that I grew up with as a small child. I always cleaned the windows. I, inside and out, took the screens out, washed them.
Put them away.
Yeah.
Put them away. Yeah.
But, you know, I can't get anyone to help me. It's just me doing that. So that, I guess that's the normal. It's hard to train others to do that for you. That's what you like to do. But in talking about some of our landscapes, we do have all kinds of things that we do. But tell me some of the things we should start with. When we're looking at spring house cleaning or house cleaning in our landscape, it's a little different. So what are some of the things that we might want to look at first when we're looking at that?
Well, I think the first thing that you'll need to do is to go out, walk your landscape, and identify what areas you would like to improve for that growing season. It could be planting beds in the backyard where you'll sit and, you know, after you get home from work. But you need to identify those areas and identify the environmental conditions. And what I mean by that is sunlight. Is there a lot of sun on that area? Is there a little sun on that area? What's the soil like? Is the soil sandy, or is it more silty? And that'll tell you, you know, if you're going to put a plant in there that might be a little bit more drought tolerant or not drought tolerant. And after you do that, after you figure out those areas of concern, you might want to take a little pad and pencil out there and map that area out. And then when you go to purchase the plants that you want to put in, you match those plants to that environmental condition. We like to call it right plant, right place.
I've heard that many times. Right plant, right place. Yeah.
So that's a great start. And
so that's if you're putting new plants in, or
that's if you're putting a new plant in.
Maybe removing some and putting some different ones in.
And you know, we had a cold shot this year, and but for the most part it was warm. So if you have any plants that may have been affected by the cold, start to consider those the types of plants that you're going to want to prune back. You might want to wait a little bit longer, but you're going to prune those back. You're going to look at, do you need any mulch in the landscape? How much mulch you're going to need, what type of mulch you want to put in there, how you're going to mulch that area. You know, you're going to want to also start to check out your irrigation system. Is your irrigation system running well? It might have been turned off for the winter months. And so you're going to get out there, start cleaning those irrigation heads. You're going to look at, you know, things like that.
So if we were putting mulch down, you mentioned different kinds of mulch. What if someone's putting the mulch down for you? If you don't, you know, you live in a community, they put the mulch down for you. I mean, sometimes they blow it in, sometimes they throw it in. Is there something that you should be watchful of? I mean, you can't really change perhaps what kind of mulch they're using, but
you can't. But you want to have at least 3 inches of mulch on that planting bed after everything has settled.
Okay.
Okay, and then you don't want that mulch up against your shrubs, up against your trees, because it'll keep mulch, or it'll keep moisture in there.
Okay.
And you
might need to go out and move it away.
Yeah, you want to move it out maybe 2 inches, 3 inches
after
away.
They're done. Go out and,
right.
and maybe check and make sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, you may have to do that. You know, with the contractors, you know, they have X amount of time,
right?
And they're, like you said, they're getting it in there, and they may not pay as much attention as they should to having that mulch pulled away from the shrubs.
Okay, and even if you're doing it yourself, you want to make sure you're doing that as well.
Right. And it gives you some buy-in to your landscape.
Right. And so if you find that it settles more than you want, you just put another layer on?
Yes, you can. Okay. You can put put another layer on, and but you know, around 3 inches is where you want to keep it, and that way you're going to retain moisture, acts as a buffer to heat come summertime, and so
It also keeps weeds away, right?
It keeps weeds away, which is the major benefit. We're going to talk about that later on.
Great.
And then that also, that mulch breaks down and almost becomes compost in your soil and helps improve the water holding capacity to it and nutrient holding capacity.
Very good.
Mulch is good.
Mulch is a good thing. Okay. All right. Well, you know, we talked a few things about that. So we've identified the right plant, right place in the beginning. So in mulching is really good. Now, what about pruning? I mean, you talked a little bit, you touched on it, like if they'd had some damage from the cold, or what if they, you know, the plant has grown tremendously, you know, from the last time they pruned till now. So can they cut it way back to, you know, nothing, you know, a few feet off the ground? How much should they remove?
Well, on shrubs, the universal recommendation is no more than 1/3 of the plant material.
Okay, so 1/3 of the height. Say if it was 9 feet, you would take only 3 feet off?
3 feet off of it,
Got it.
And
okay.
so, and then you want to, when you're pruning that back, you want to look for an area where you're going to have a little node on the side of that stem, and it's just a small bump. And that's where your next branch is going to come off of when you make that cut. Because when you make that cut, you'll stop the hormones and pheromones from going up further into the plant, and they shoot out to the side, so it gives it some direction there.
So a node is kind of like on your finger, where your little knuckle is.
Yep,
That's
perfect.
like a node.
Yeah.
Okay, so you would cut slightly above that node?
Yes, slightly above it, and
Okay.
at an angle, I would say probably about 45 degrees.
Okay, so you cut it slightly 45
yeah,
degrees.
and you don't want to go too far out, because that stem can rot, and you don't want to come too close to it.
So you cut right above the knuckle.
Right above,
or the
right above
node.
the knuckle. Just
Okay.
below the fingernail.
Just below the fingernail.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's a good way to look at it though, because a lot of people don't understand the node concept.
Yeah.
So, you know, think of your knuckle where, and it's a little bit of a swelling there too, right?
Yes, yeah.
Where the new growth, like you said, is going to be coming out.
Right, and sharp
Tools.
pruners. Sharp tools.
Very good point,
Yeah.
huh? Okay.
And so that may be a part of your spring regimen, is sharpening up your
tools?
Your tools, yeah.
Yeah, and probably cleaning them too.
Yes.
Okay, because I know sometimes we have things that can be passed. Like if you've got a plant in your yard and you're pruning it out because you don't want it anymore, and it may have been diseased or something, and then you don't clean those pruners, when you go to the other one that you're pruning that you want to keep, you could be passing something.
You can, and you can simply go in there with 1 part bleach to 3 parts water. And as you go from shrub to shrub to shrub, if there is a disease there or you're concerned about that, you just rinse those pruners off a little bit and away you go again.
So do you rinse them off with the bleach and then rinse them off again with water?
No, you just go ahead and put the
Okay.
3 parts to 1 part in a container, bucket, whatever it is.
And then just either dip them in or wipe it on, depending on the tool, I guess.
Right.
Okay. And certain tools are better for pruning, like if you're doing shrubs, hand pruners, loppers, I think.
Loppers, I prefer the bypass because you get a cleaner cut.
And a bypass is
That if instead of an anvil, that would be an anvil like this. Bypass is going to come down like that. It'll usually have like a half-moon blade on the top of it,
Okay.
and it just goes by the other blade.
Okay.
So it goes like that.
Very good.
Nice cut.
I like how we use our fingers for things, huh? Good demonstration.
Yeah,
Okay, and then of course if we're doing trees, now I just recently was taking my dog for a walk, and the neighbor was explaining to me how he had just put in different trees and stuff, and he goes, yeah, I'm controlling the height of my magnolia, so I cut the top out. Now, that didn't seem like a good idea to me.
No, and it's not. You don't want to cut the tops out of your trees.
Because we see this a lot when they want to keep the tree like a lollipop or a certain size, they cut the top out. But what happens if you do something like that?
Well, you can invite, number one, you can invite the potential for diseases into that tree, and it just isn't going to make the tree look
Very nice.
very nice. So,
Yeah. I mean, we were talking when he pruned it,
yeah.
it was probably at least a 3 or 4 inch diameter trunk that he cut.
oh yeah,
Totally.
no, you don't want to do that. You want to actually prune those branches out that are on your main stem down to what we call a lateral. Of course, we can go on and discuss pruning all day long. You know, it's one of my
Sure.
favorite topics.
Sure.
But it's suffice to say that you do not want to prune the top part or the central leader
Okay.
of that tree.
Okay. And if they wanted more information about pruning trees properly, they can look at our website and find information
and
there.
there's a lot of good information there, a lot of good pictures, a really good website by one of our specialists, Dr. Ed Gilman, and PowerPoints, if you have that capability, it's all there for them.
Okay, and that's a really good thing to do, because pictures are really good to see. And of course, you can always prune less and come back and prune more.
Right,
You know,
absolutely.
stand back, take a look, and see if it's the shape and size that you were looking for.
And that's oftentimes what you do. I mean, it's to me, sometimes it's like painting a picture where you're just not going to just start painting unless you got to buy number stuff like I do.
Yeah, I do
But
too.
you know, you step back and you look at the shrub, or you look at the tree. You can see that it's starting to take form. You understand why you're out there to prune. Are you out there to prune to remove just dead wood, to promote flowering, to promote growth?
Okay.
So you have to figure out why you're out there pruning, before you go out pruning, and then when you are, you know, take a step back. So it's going to take you some time.
Okay, and then you mentioned also, like, if cold damage. If you're pruning, like say the plant had some cold damage, there were some areas around this year, in fact, that had some really cool temperatures. So if they had damage on some of the new material, how would they know where to prune to?
Well, what you're going to do is you're going to prune down. First of all, you can go in there with the fingernail test.
The fingers again, our hands. Wow, we are really good at this.
And I don't keep mine as long as some folks do, so it might be a little bit more difficult. But anyhow, you scratch. Keep scratching down, and where you find that first part of green, and then find your node.
Okay.
Right?
And right above it?
That's where you're going to make your cut, above it. Now, as far as when you're going to make that cut, you know, the old time saying is that, you know, you're pretty safe from freeze after a full moon of March. And so you don't want to go in too early and cut it, and that's what your tendency is. You see all this damage out in the landscape, and you want to cut all that damage out. You stimulate new growth, and if another cold shot comes through, you can really knock that tree or that shrub out. So you got to be a little patient, and it's difficult.
And that's hard for most people,
yeah, it is.
Especially with things starting to bloom and flower right now, and you know, pollen everywhere.
Yep.
They keep thinking that it is definitely spring, so you know, you just kind of got to weigh that. So if you do it too early, then you may have some more damage on that plant you just pruned.
Yes.
Okay, that's a good point to bring up. Well, I know we've talked a little bit about pruning, and we talked about, and you mentioned something about irrigation. So you said check your systems right now. How often should our systems be coming on? If they were kind of shut off during the winter or slowed down, it's springtime.
For right now, well, if it's still cool and the grass isn't actively growing, and it's not yet, it's getting there, you really don't need to irrigate maybe once a week. Maybe every 10 days.
Okay.
You know, but as it gets into spring and we get into that inevitable dry period, then you're going to have to be able to, if you have an irrigation system, you want to supplement that rain with anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to about an inch of supplemental irrigation per week. Now, depending on if you have sandy soils or if you have silty soils, that's where that 3/4 to 1 inch comes in. But if you're getting a 1/2 of an inch, or if you're getting an inch of rain, then you don't. You don't need to have it on.
Completely eliminate that 1 week's requirement.
Yeah, absolutely.
That one water cycle.
Right, and you know, you can have a rain valve in your landscape, the shut-off devices, and that will automatically turn your irrigation off, actually, by law.
I was going to say, that's the law now to have one of those.
That is the law.
Of course, you need to have it connected to your irrigation clock.
That's as funny as you think that is.
I do say that because I've seen that before where they're not connected. And of course, also the device, because it collects the rain from the roof, should be out a ways from the overhang. You don't want it to be underneath where it can't collect anything. So that otherwise it doesn't work very well. Right,
and then you also have to check the valve itself, or the meter, and to the device, to make sure that the little sponge inside of it isn't all dried and cracked.
Yeah, they probably only last so long,
yeah,
right?
So you have, that's a replacement thing.
Another spring cleaning thing. Check
that out. Yeah. And so for irrigation, you know, clean out your heads, make sure everything's working good, and you have good irrigation, that you have it set so that it's applying water equally all over the landscape, good uniformity of coverage. Those are the types of things that you'd like to check out.
Okay.
And again, at our website, there's some really good information with pictures on how you can go out and check your information or your irrigation during the year.
Very good, very good. Well, I know another thing that's really important right now, and we've had a lot of information on in the area about the fertilizers, and many of our counties have fertilizer ordinances. Some of our cities have them, and some of them are a little different. Some have a blackout period, as they call it. So kind of walk us through fertilization. You mentioned that things weren't actively growing right now. The grass wasn't, apparently. Some things may be starting to grow a little bit. So when is the best time to fertilize?
Well, once your landscape starts to actively grow, and that's when the plants are asking for nutrients, and that's when they'll be able to take those nutrients that you put in the soil and pull them up into the plant.
Now, how does the plant ask?
Well, I think
I mean, do you have a little conversation? Or?
Well, yeah, fertilizer. Well, it's when it starts actively growing. It's like as a child, when you're actively growing, you want that child to
eat more.
Eat more. And the plant is there, and it's starting to grow, and it wants some food to be able to flower and to set its roots and to thicken up its stems and its leaves, you know, put out new growth.
So you don't want to wait for it to like show you that it's needing it, like yellow or things of that nature. You want to be constantly feeding it like anything else that's in nature that needs to eat.
Yes, yeah,
okay.
And sometimes that's not easy because, you know, you and I as experts can know when that timing is, but oftentimes the homeowners don't. And you'll see that a lot of times with palm and nutritional problems with palms. But again, the first signs of when that shrub may need to be fed show up in some sort of a nutrient deficiency, and that's when you want to get in there and fertilize that landscape.
Okay, and I know lots of times the people have a different problem with their palm trees because our soils are so different here. So they may have been fertilizing their palm like they saw the coloration that needed to be treated, so they fertilized and they're not seeing anything different about the new growth. So they probably should have checked their soil. Their pH maybe?
Well,
or?
yeah, they could have. And a couple of other things is that, you know, when they fertilize their palm, if they have that turf grass that's going right up to the palm, and you see this quite often, that turf grass is going to start to say, oh, good, you know, I'm going to take that before the palm tree is going to get it.
Right. Its roots are shallower, aren't they?
Yeah. So you have that. And, of course, if you have alkaline soils, then, you know, some of that fertilizer might not be available to the tree because it's being held so tightly on the soil particle because of the pH. Yes.
Okay. And there's like iron is one of those, right?
Iron is one of them. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And well, all of the elements at extremes, extremely low alkalinity, or I mean high alkalinity and low acidity. And we see more alkalinity, I think, in this area because of our soils being so calcareous or full of calcium that
they're higher in pH.
They're higher in pH, right?
Okay.
Right.
So that's something to think about. Now, when we fertilize, we want to wait for things to be actively growing. So we're fertilizing. So our grass starts to grow. We need to mow. That's the time to fertilize.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, you're fertilizing, and you want to make sure that you're looking at the fertilizer label, and that you're understanding if it is a complete fertilizer. So you're going to look at those 3 numbers, the big 3 that's on the front of that label.
Okay.
So you're going to want to look at that. Now,
and the first one is?
The first one's going to be nitrogen.
And the second one is?
Is going to be phosphorus.
And the third one?
And the third one will be potassium.
Okay. And we also need to look now, according to the new fertilizer ordinance, there's a blackout period that goes from...
that'll be from the beginning of June through the end of September.
Okay, and that starts this year.
That'll start this year, where you're not going to be able to fertilize with any products that have nitrogen or phosphorus in them.
Okay. So you could fertilize with an iron product.
Yes, you can.
If you wanted
go
to
in
keep
there.
your grass green during the summertime.
Yeah, or you can go in with some of the minor nutrients that are also required.
Should your grass show you that it needs it, perhaps? Because you could maybe throw things off, right? If you use micronutrients in not correctly.
Yes, it can throw off the imbalance of, and plus you're going to need some of the other macronutrients there to transport those micros around your shrub or your tree or your turf grass.
Like potassium?
Yes, potassium,
magnesium,
exactly.
things like that. Okay.
Yeah.
And those are macronutrients?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, all right, so when we talk about the fertilizer that we can use right now, it has to be, what, 50%?
Well, that's what the ordinance, when that ordinance goes into effect, which I believe is going to be the beginning of June, it's going to say that it's going to be a 50% slow release nitrogen.
Okay.
So what that is saying is that 50% of the nitrogen that is available in the bag of fertilizer that you purchase has to be slow release, or it has to be water insoluble.
Insoluble.
Insoluble, yes.
Okay. And how do they make it that way? What if we were to turn over a bag and look at to see? It might say on the front 50% slow release, or maybe more. But how do we know if we turn over the bag on the back? What would tell us that we were looking at 50% slow release?
Well, you're going to see a percentage of that nitrogen as an insoluble percentage. And so let's say we have 15%. It's a 15% nitrogen, 0 phosphorus, 15% potassium.
Okay.
And it says it's 50% slow release.
Okay.
It says that on the front of the bag. Okay?
Right.
50% slow release.
Okay.
You turn that over and you look at the percentage that is water insoluble.
Okay.
All right. So that would say on that label, it would say 7.5% is water insoluble, which gives that the 50% slow release.
Okay, and it might say coated?
Well, it could say, yeah, it could say polymer coated. It could say sulfur coated.
Okay.
With the sulfur coated, that you're going to end up having larger pellets that won't break down. But the process is that urea, let's say, sulfur colored or polymer coated, will react to the amount of irrigation that you put down, or it can react to bacterial on the sulfur coated urea itself, or the polymer coated urea. Sometimes they put in both of them.
Right, double coating.
Double coating,
right,
to protect the nitrogen that's inside of that polymer from being destroyed when in transport, or if you put it into your fertilizer spreader.
Okay, because it can get nicked and stuff,
It can
right?
get nicked up, yeah.
So if you have a double coating on, the nicking isn't going to let that go out right away.
So the purpose of that is to let that nitrogen release slowly into the landscape.
So you're slowly feeding the plant instead of one-time shot with a quick release or a soluble product.
Right, yes.
Okay. All right. And I noticed you also have a spreader with us today.
I did. I brought a spreader along with us.
Okay, and that's because you're going to spread the studio, right, with fertilizer.
We did, and we have this magnolia tree over here, although it looks pretty nice, but I think it has a few nutrient deficiencies, so we're going to check that one as well.
Okay, so tell us about the spreader.
Well, it says you can purchase these spreaders from a number of sources, and what they're going to do is it's a broadcast spreader.
Okay.
So it helps you to distribute your fertilizer evenly in the landscape.
Okay.
Now there's a couple things that you have to know about these. Is typically on the back of a bag of fertilizer you're going to see, well, you know, if it's a X fertilizer spreader, then you're going to set it at this setting.
Okay.
If it's a Y fertilizer, then you can set it at that setting.
Okay.
So my recommendation is to match that up. This is the easiest way to do it, Anita, and then maybe a little bit less on your setting.
Okay.
Okay. So, and the universal recommendation is 1 pound of slow release nitrogen per 1,000 square feet.
Okay.
So when you're figuring out how much square footage is in your landscape, first of all, take the entire square footage of your yard, right? Length times width.
Right.
And then start subtracting the square footage of your house,
And
the square footage of your
driveway,
patio and
yeah.
your driveway.
Okay.
And then you're going to come up with the square footage in your yard. And that's, after all you're going to be fertilizing.
Right.
And
more's not better.
And more is not better. No,
Right.
because actually there is a point where that plant will do no better by putting on additional fertilizer.
Okay.
It's that law of diminishing returns
Right.
type of attitude. Well, anyhow, but we have this fertilizer spreader here, and one of the things that we noticed is that it has a shield on it.
I saw that white part there.
That white part there.
Okay. And that shield is for?
That shield is to prevent fertilizer from going onto impervious surfaces, driveways or sidewalks, because that can get washed down into the storm drain.
The storm drain, yeah.
Also, it prevents fertilizer from getting into water bodies.
Oh, how far should you be back from that water body?
Well, the new ordinance is going to read 10 feet.
Okay.
10 feet.
So 10 feet, and you should still have that shield on there.
Yes.
Okay.
According to our ordinance.
Our ordinance.
Yes.
Okay. So getting a shield on your spreader if you're going to do it yourselves. If you're hiring someone, make sure that they're doing it correctly too. You don't want to get in trouble, because sometimes it's not just them that gets in trouble. It could also be the homeowner too. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And then you'll see that there's that little metal bar on it, and that is used to lift that shield and drop that shield.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. That tells us a lot about the spreader, and that you should have a shield on it when you're fertilizing, and making sure 10 feet from the water body.
Yes.
Okay. And anything. Oh, when. This is one that I found, is that when you're going down with your spreader one way, and then you turn around and come back the other way, when you get to the end, before you turn around, you should close the device that lets the fertilizer out, because otherwise you've left a little pile of fertilizer at each end.
Yeah, because you're going at your typical walking speed, whatever that is, and all walking speeds are different.
Sure.
But when you get to the end of that pathway, you're slowing down and rotating it around, and that fertilizer spreader starts to slow down, and you're going to get more release right in that area. You can burn that out.
Yeah.
And when you are fertilizing, try to run north and south, and then east and west.
Okay. So you go north, and then south, and then east, and then west?
Yeah, and you just get better coverage on that.
So kind of like a checkerboard.
Yeah, yeah. And if you get some of that fertilizer into your ornamental beds, hey, that's fine.
Okay.
But you want to make sure that you're not getting any of that fertilizer on a driveway or on a street. And if it is, sweep it up.
Put it onto the landscape.
And use it in the landscape.
Very good.
And I would say that at that point, when you sweep it up, is to put it around your ornamentals, because if you start hand tossing it on the grass, that's another way that it can get burned out.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, I think you guys have heard a lot of information about the landscape and how to do your house cleaning in the spring or any time. So, join us again next time for another adventure in Extension.